Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex ideas to give you that well-informed edge.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into a concept that sparked, well, countless debates. Toxic masculinity. Now, you've probably heard this term used, right, to describe harmful societal pressures on men. Things like suppressing emotions or glorifying aggression.
And these things are often linked to pretty significant negative outcomes in society. Yeah.
It's a really pervasive idea, isn't it? This notion that certain behaviors are just part of masculinity, and fixing them means, I don't know, changing what it means to be a man.
Exactly. Which can be a really loaded conversation.
Absolutely. And that brings us right to our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore a very specific source that offers, honestly, a provocative counter-argument to some of these ideas.
A different take.
Our goal is just to unpack its core arguments, pull out the insights, and give you, the listener, a fuller picture of this really important conversation, maybe a surprising one.
Okay, so the piece we're looking at today is an excerpt from an audio presentation. It's titled Make Men Masculine Again by Ali Stuckey for Prager University.
Prager University, okay.
And it jumps right into the debate, really challenges some deeply held assumptions about masculinity right from the start.
And it poses a central question almost immediately. What if the solutions we usually hear about for issues tied to masculinity? What if they're not just wrong, but actually harmful?
That's a pretty bold claim to open with.
It is. So let's unpack it. So the piece kicks off by acknowledging how often things like rape, murder, and war get linked specifically to men.
Right. And how traits like aggression, violence, ambition, they get slapped with that toxic masculinity label pretty quickly.
And from there, it points to what it calls the obvious solution people often suggest: make men less masculine. Maybe, more like women.
But the source immediately pushes back. It says flat out, this way of thinking is not only wrong, it's dangerous.
Wow, okay. So no beating around the bush there.
Not at all. It really sets up a direct confrontation with sort of the mainstream narrative from the get-go.
And this is where the argument really takes a turn, and it's quite, well, compelling in its own way. The central claim here is that trying to make men more like women doesn't actually reduce your toxic masculinity.
It argues it increases it.
Increases it. How?
Well, the core idea they present is that bad men don't become good when they stop being men.
Okay.
Instead, they become good when they stop being bad. It's about the behavior, not the fundamental nature, according to this source.
So it's not about removing masculinity itself.
No, and that leads to this concept of harnessed masculinity. This piece argues that things like aggression, violence, even that unbridled ambition, you can't just eliminate them from the male psyche.
You can't get rid of them.
Right. According to this view, you can only channel them, harness them.
So when these, let's say, powerful traits are harnessed, the source suggests they actually transform from tools of harm into instruments for good.
Exactly. It's not about weakening these energies. It's about giving them direction, purpose.
Okay, that's a significant reframing. Do they give examples?
They do. They offer some pretty vivid ones, like the same masculine traits that could bring destruction.
Yeah.
They can also defeat tyranny, traits that might fuel greed if unchecked. When directed properly, they can build economies. And the same drive that leads to foolish risks.
Wow, absolutely too.
Heroic risks. It's all about the context and the harnessing, the intention.
So the core takeaway here, the central thesis, seems to be the answer isn't less masculinity.
But better masculinity. Not taking it away, but refining it, shaping it for good.
Okay. And this better masculinity, does the source describe what that actually looks like in practice?
It does, yeah. It gives some really concrete, sort of everyday examples, not just abstract ideas.
Like what?
Well, it describes it as simple as a young man opening the door for a girl on a first date.
Okay, chivalry.
Or a father working long hours, sacrificing to provide for his family.
Responsibility.
And then, on a larger scale, a soldier risking his life to defend his country.
Sacrifice and protection. So these are presented as positive, functional examples of masculinity.
Exactly. In this view, that's masculinity operating for good.
So if harnessed masculinity is the ideal, what does the source see as the problem in society today?
Well, here's another bold claim. It argues the issue isn't that men are too masculine, but that they're not masculine enough.
Not masculine enough. Okay, explain that.
It asserts that when men embrace this healthy, productive masculinity, they step up. They become leaders, warriors, heroes.
Uh-huh.
But, and this is crucial for their argument, when men deny their masculinity, they argue they run away from responsibility.
And the result?
Destruction and despair left behind. A vacuum.
Does the source offer evidence for this denial having consequences?
It does. It points to several striking consequences attributed to this perceived denial, focusing heavily on fatherlessness.
Exactly what's
Okay. It states, for instance, that 1 in 4 fathers now lives apart from his children.
1 in 4. That's significant.
It is. And the piece draws direct lines from that to outcomes for children.
What kind of outcomes?
Well, it says, children growing up without a dad are generally more depressed than peers with both parents.
Okay.
They're also at far greater risk, it claims, for things like incarceration, teen pregnancy, and falling into poverty.
Serious societal issues being linked directly to father absence here.
Very directly. And here's a statistic that really jumps out. The source highlights that 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless.
71%. Wow.
Yeah. And it even weaves in a quote from Barack Obama back when he was a senator in 2008.
What did he say?
He said, "Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, family is the most important, and we are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation."
Strong words on the importance of fathers.
And he followed it up saying, if we are honest with ourselves, we'll admit that too many fathers are missing from too many lives and too many homes.
So the source uses Obama's word to underscore its point about the fatherlessness crisis.
Precisely. Those statistics, combined with that quote, paint a really stark picture of vulnerability, don't they?
It definitely makes you think about the ripple effects generationally.
Yeah. Okay.
So from fatherlessness, where does the argument go?
It shifts towards what you might call a more controversial area. It points to what it calls a current trend to actively feminize young men.
Feminize them.
It argues this is done in pursuit of some utopian notion of equality and peace, and it claims this starts incredibly early.
Like in childhood.
Yeah. It traces it right to the school classroom,
Yeah.
where it says, boys are invariably the problem.
Okay.
And on the playground, where aggressive games like dodgeball have long been banished, the implication being that natural male energy is seen as problematic.
And it doesn't stop there.
No, it goes further. It points to policies like everybody gets a trophy or don't run up the score in sports.
Right. Things meant to promote fairness, maybe.
But the source argues these things tell young men that their intrinsic desire to compete, to strive, is somehow wrong, that it undermines a core masculine drive.
Interesting critique of those participation-focused policies.
And this anti-male tilt, as the source calls it, is then said to continue right through higher education and even into the workplace.
And the alleged result of all this.
According to the source, millions of tentative men, unhappy women, and confused boys and girls. A widespread negative impact.
Tentative men, unhappy women. That's quite a statement.
It is, and it leads into another claim that many might find particularly provocative.
Go on.
It suggests that every woman knows a kind of secret truth.
Which is?
That women ultimately want real men, men they can count on, men they can look up to.
Okay, real men. What does that mean in this context?
Oh, the piece really doubles down on the idea that no amount of feminist theory can change this fundamental desire.
Right.
It argues that women are simply not attracted to passive men, men who expect them to be the providers, the protectors, the leaders.
So it's framing this as a kind of biological imperative almost.
Pretty much. It explicitly states this desire for a strong, responsible man is innate.
Innate.
Not just a social construct or cultural pressure. It's presented as fundamental.
That's definitely a perspective that challenges a lot of contemporary thinking on gender roles.
It absolutely does. And it sets up the source's rather dire warning
Which is?
that this devaluation of masculinity, this trend it's described, won't end well.
Won't end well. How so?
It highlights the essential roles that it believes these feminine, passive men simply cannot fulfill.
Roles like?
Well, the source argues passive men don't stop evil. They don't defend. They don't protect. They don't act, provide, or lead.
So basically all the functions it previously associated with harnessed masculinity.
Exactly. In short, it says they don't do the things we have always needed men to do for society to thrive. It paints a picture of societal breakdown if masculinity isn't valued.
And to support this further, you mentioned a philosophical connection.
Yes, it draws on C.S. Lewis, specifically his book, The Abolition of Man.
Ah, okay. How does Lewis fit in?
The source explains Lewis's concept of this tension within humans between the cerebral man, intellect, spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and the visceral man appetite, the sort of animalistic side.
The head in the gut, so to speak.
You could put it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
And the source interprets Lewis as saying we need both in balance.
They both. Why?
Because if you take one away, Lewis suggests, you're left with a man who's either weak or wicked, out of balance.
Weak or wicked? How does the source apply that?
Well, it connects it directly back to its main argument. It uses Lewis to suggest that trying to suppress that visceral or masculine side doesn't create better men.
It creates.
Weak men. And, crucially, the source argues, in a world where wickedness exists, weak men are nothing more than enablers of wicked men.
Okay, so weakness itself becomes a problem because it allows bad things to happen.
That's the connection they're making. It suggests that this attempt to tame men, as they see it, actually makes society more vulnerable, not less. It's quite a specific interpretation of Lewis, focusing on that enabling aspect.
Right. It really pushes back against the idea that reducing traditional masculine traits automatically leads to peace or safety.
Exactly.
So this brings the discussion full circle then. Back to the initial problems mentioned, like rape, murder, war.
Precisely. The source ties it all together with a striking conclusion. It says these terrible things have two key things in common.
Which are?
First, bad men who do the raping, murdering, and wearing, the perpetrators.
Okay, obvious enough. And second,
And weak men who won't stop them, the enablers, tying back to that Lewis point.
so it's not just the bad men, but the lack of good or strong men to counteract them.
That's the argument, which leads directly to its ultimate call to action.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
We need good men.
You got it, clear and direct. We need good men who will step up, protect, lead, defend.
And it ends then with that powerful summarizing statement we mentioned earlier.
It does. The final line is, it's not masculinity that's toxic, it's the lack of it.
Wow. Quite the concluding thought. It completely inverts the common narrative.
It really does.
So we've definitely explored a challenging and very specific argument today, one that really flips the script on how many people view toxic masculinity.
Yeah, this perspective argues that many societal problems linked to men stem not from too much masculinity, but from its absence or its misdirection.
And that harnessing those masculine traits, directing them for good, is actually crucial for a thriving society, according to this source.
It's certainly a distinct viewpoint in the broader conversation.
So for you listening, we invite you to consider how these specific arguments and observations from this particular piece resonate, or perhaps clash, with your own experiences or understandings of modern society and the roles of men within it.
It's worth reflecting on where these ideas fit into the bigger picture for you.
And as you mull that over, here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. Building on the source, but stepping back a bit. If masculinity can indeed be harnessed for good, as this piece suggests, what societal structures or individual practices might actually foster that kind of healthy direction? And maybe more importantly, what would be the biggest challenges in trying to do that today?
That's a big question to ponder. How do you cultivate the good without enabling the bad or suppressing something vital? Lots to think about there.